Don't forget to turn your,
Make sure that when you're talking, just
try to talk into these. Yeah, I was listening the other night and I could not hear half the time. Yeah. Okay, it's 4 o'clock and I'm going to call to order the planning board meeting for Wednesday, December the 11th. Thank you all for coming out on this rather lousy day. I certainly do appreciate it. The first item on the agenda is introduction and welcome to Libya Planners, Kim and Peter. Are you guys on the Zoom? Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, can you hear me?
Just barely. I was going to say, but Jen's going to turn it up.
Okay.
We are actually delighted to welcome you. This will be the first meeting that we've had together. So it's nice to have a new town planner. So go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Kim Salerno and I am the principal of Libra Planners. And we were recently hired by the town of New Shoreham to assist the planning board with monthly meetings in the way of writing reports. I'm the principal, I'm a planner, but my partner, Peter Friedrichs, has extensive municipal planning experience, and he'll be actually leading the municipal planning work for Block Island. We also have a junior staff who is not on this call, who will be assisting us with report writing. We had the chance to create a report for you, and hopefully you've all seen it on the tents and storage containers. And this should give you an idea of how we plan on furnishing information to you. And once we get to that agenda item, we welcome your comments and insights into how useful that report will be for the planning board.
Good. Thank you very much and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, number 2. We have a public hearing for proposed amendments for New Shoreham land development and subdivision regulations. The town is proposing amendments to multiple sections of the New Shoreham land development and subdivision regulations to bring the regulations into compliance with state law. Effective change January 1, 2024. Proposed amendments include sections that concerned 1, land development and subdivision regulations, sections 501, the administrative officer, section 505, Board of Appeals, and section 506, appeals to the Superior Court. All right, Karen, are you on? There she is.
Hello.
Hi, welcome aboard this lovely day. Would you like to walk us through some of the highlights of these various articles, and then we'll see if we have questions.
Sure.
Thank
So
you.
again, this is an effort to come into compliance with the state law changes. Most of the language, again, has been added at the state law level. Trying to see if there's anything of major importance that you would want to know. Not really. Everything here is just coming into conformance and remaining consistent internally with the ordinance. So unless there's any questions, I would recommend passage.
Okay.
it's a public hearing, so you just need to see if there's anybody.
Let me officially open the public hearing, which I did not do, but that's my mistake. So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Now, first of all, start with the board. Does anybody here have questions that Karen can answer?
Just a very simple question.
Mm.
Who makes up the Board of Appeal?
Where are you seeing that? Under 505?
Yes, page 1, letter C.
So generally that is the zoning board acting as the Board of Appeal.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions from anybody on the board? Okay. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Okay. Hearing none, then I will make a motion that the public hearing be closed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. And I will also make a motion that we adopt for approval for sections 501, the administrative officer, sections 505, the Board of Appeals, and sections 506, appeals to the Superior Court.
Second.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thank you, Karen. Okay. Number 3, affordable and attainable housing presentation by Weston and Sampson regarding strategies for affordable and attainable housing. Prioritize the list of strategies and identify feasible, favorable implements to the short term. Ashley, sweet, are you on?
I am.
Wonderful.
Hello, everyone. I also have
Ashley,
Elizabeth.
can I just stop you for 1 second? I'm sorry, but Kim,
Yeah.
can you mute your microphone? Because I think it will come in louder. Sometimes it. Okay, feel free to unmute it if you need to. Well, go ahead, Ashley, sorry.
Thank you. So I also have Elizabeth Haney here with me from Weston and Sampson, who has been working on this.
That's better.
And what we have for you is a presentation that we want to go over with you. And this is relatively high level. This is also work that's being funded through the MTAP grant that the town obtained to improve their regulations for housing development. And what we've done is at a pretty high level have pulled together some concepts in looking at your current regulatory framework and also, you know, what's going on out in the world, best practices, things that other communities are doing, and really have put this together as sort of a menu for you to look at. We realize that through further discussion of some of these concepts, it might not work out for New Shoreham. Others might need to be amended, slightly in order to work for New Shoreham the way that the town would like them to. So our goal this evening is to go over this presentation with you at a relatively high level and then work with you to kind of refine these further and, decide which few might work well for the town and that we could help you either with a set of recommendations on how to implement them or actually draft some regulatory language or amend some existing regulatory language in that direction. The question I have before we get started with the presentation for Jen is we've made a couple of slight adjustments to the presentation that we did send. The other thing that we realized, which is part of the adjustments that we made, is the presentation that we sent earlier was based on a summary memo of your survey before it had closed. We've updated the numbers to make sure that those reflect the full survey that you did previously. The premise has not changed. The results were essentially the same. It's just the numbers in the original presentation are off slightly. It doesn't account for the entire representation of that survey. Is it possible for us to share the screen for the presentation?
I'm pretty sure you can.
Okay. If you could give Elizabeth permission, she's gonna go through a majority. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Could you, Ashley, could you email me the
I
document?
will. Yep,
Thank you.
that was the next thing I was gonna say was we will make sure to get this to the town immediately following the meeting so that you can post an updated presentation. And again, the premise remains. It's just there's some details that we updated since sending it. We'd like to do this, in a kind of a relaxed way. So stop us if you have questions or you want to talk about something further. We're happy to have you jump in and interject and work our way through the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth. She's going to do a majority of the slides, but we're both available to discuss anything further and answer any questions.
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks, folks, for letting us share the screen to show those corrected slides. I'm just going to zoom through a couple because I think Ashley went over some of what we'll talk about. But so just to orient you to kind of what we'll talk about today, we'll talk about some of the existing needs analysis that you folks, the town has already done. Then we'll kind of talk about some of the cost context as you look to create affordable and attainable housing. And then we have some suggested enforceable policy actions and then programmatic actions. That's kind of the menu that Ashley spoke to. And so Ashley just went over this. Ashley, was there anything else you wanted to add about the context for the project?
No, I think I covered it. I got a little ahead of myself and covered it before the slide.
That's okay. It's good to have a preview. And so we wanted to orient you folks to some analysis that you may have already seen, but we wanted to bring back up just because we know that New Shoreham is a unique environment. We can pull census data, but that doesn't necessarily always tell the full story of what's going on in the community. So there was a survey done in 2022. It closed in June. So this is the update with the June results. And so that had almost 50 respondents, which is almost a 10% participation rate in terms of year-round households in New Shoreham. And so there was less participation from homeowners, but almost half of renters living in New Shoreham did participate. And so if you want to see the kind of what's the breakdown of census data for renters and owners, that's at the bottom of this slide. And some of the major stats coming out of that are unique and are notable. So, about 40% of folks who replied to this survey said that they had to relocate seasonally. Sorry, was someone trying to jump in? Just thought I heard a voice. Okay. And there were some folks who reported massive cost burden. So spending over 60% of their income on housing, when kind of the generally accepted threshold for housing cost burden is that you shouldn't spend more than a third. There are folks who are spending 2/3 of their income on housing. About almost 30% of survey takers share housing because there are so few affordable rental options on the island. And then 21% live in employer-provided housing, which means that their housing is directly tied to their job security. And there are issues with kind of access and flexibility related to that as well. The seasonal economy is a major factor in inconsistent income, as well as the availability of year-round rental housing. And something kind of notable in the survey was that about half of the folks who responded said they would prefer homeownership, but high prices keep them in the rental market. But the prices that folks who responded to the survey could afford for affordable homeownership units, 50% of folks couldn't afford anything more than $300,000. In addition, some of the folks who responded have a real need for accessible housing. And there is an openness to deed restricted housing. So folks aren't saying it has to be a market rate unit. They're open to deed restricted housing. So about 80% said they were open to definitely or maybe open to deed restricted homeownership as an option. And so this is just a graphic kind of showing you how that breakdown of yes, maybe, and no was on that deed restricted homeownership program question. The survey also asked folks what their income levels were. And I have a slide after this that shows you sort of how HUD classifies folks' incomes, but I'll show you this and I can toggle back and forth. But sorry, I think my lights might be flashing because of the storm. So if you see that, that's what's going on. But in terms of the survey, a large number of folks who responded to the survey are making below 100% of area median income. And so this is a slide with quite a bit of info on it, but for your context, so when the state of Rhode Island or the federal government funds deed restricted housing, they use an income limit. So that's where somebody comes in and they have to show their pay stubs and prove their income. And the way that the folks qualifying them look at the household, they look at how many people are in the household in order to figure out what kind of row of their chart a household fits into. So a household with 2 people is going to have lower income limits than a household with 4 people. But so for context, for a 2-person household, as of this year, to qualify under the low income or 80% AMI category, the income limit for a 2-person household is about $57,000, and for a 4-person household is about $71,000. So that's just to orient you to sort of what this bar chart I just showed you means in terms of what that looks like in terms of dollars and household sizes. Some other stuff to understand about this is that units that have income restrictions at different income levels may or may not qualify for Rhode Island's low and moderate income housing inventory. There's different units that are rental or ownership have different thresholds. Rental units have to be below 80, ownership have to be below 120 to count. And so that's that purple row kind of talking about that. But we also know that, you know, there may be interest in creating market rate units that aren't restricted for folks kind of at those higher kind of middle income levels as well. So that's listed here to just contextualize that. And so that's just a framing of kind of how affordability works, what kind of affordability there was indicated in the survey. And then we wanted to kind of contextualize what that looks like on the island. So if you look at the census or the Rhode Island Housing Fact Book for this year, the median income for New Shoreham is about $67,000 a year. Median rental data isn't available because of the way that data is collected. There's just not enough big rentals for that to be searchable. And so the median home price, if you make that median income that someone could afford, is between 190 and 220,000, depending on interest rates, and since those fluctuate. And the rent that would be affordable is about $1,700. If you put that against the current reality in New Shoreham, the median home price in New Shoreham is $1.6 million. And a household would need to make about $500,000 to afford that median home price affordably. And that's in the context of, you know, HUD also does some analysis of census data, and they're reporting that there's, you know, 200 households who make below 80% of area and median income in New Shoreham. So there's a real disjuncture kind of between costs, rents, availability, and the incomes of households who are on the island. And so that's sort of, you know, what's for sale. We know there are efforts to create deed restricted housing. So we pulled this particular example to get a sense of what development costs are in New Shoreham. And so this is a really rough back of the envelope calculation based on publicly available data. So just prefacing it with that. But the most recently public available bids for the O'Brien development were that they were getting bids of about $7.5 or $7.7 million for hard costs for those projects. So we would assume that there's usually about 25% of project costs or soft costs. So our best guess is that that project is landing somewhere around 10 million for total development costs for 16 units. And that's going to mean that for each unit in that development, it's about $630 to $640 a unit is the cost. $630,000 or $640,000 per unit for each of those units in the development, which might be closer to $650 now that, you know, we're about a year later. And so that's kind of the reality of what it costs to build in New Shoreham. But if you, excuse me, if you look at who the major funder of affordable housing is in Rhode Island, they actually have it's a handbook that talks about, you know, what their parameters are for affordable projects. And so they actually say that they're only willing to fund projects that are at a total development cost of $450,000 and less per unit. And usually state agencies do have some flexibility with what they're willing to fund, but that's a really big gap when you're talking about $200,000 per unit for the project in terms of convincing the state to be able to invest in that housing. And so this is just a visual to kind of illustrate what that gap looks like. So, you know, if this project is costing about $650,000 per unit, you have a massive gap with compared to what the median household can afford in terms of ownership or rental. And so, you know, part of what we're bringing before you are strategies that can help you start to reduce that gap in ways that make these projects more feasible. And so we're just going to kind of walk through one little example that we can dig our teeth into, one of several costs that can be spread out more. But if we look at the cost of land in New Shoreham, we're asking the question, how do you reduce the cost of land per unit? And so if you look on Zillow, again, this is a really rough estimate, but our best guess based on some lots that are for sale now is that it's an average price of about $1.4 million per acre for what we could see that's available for sale right now in New Shoreham. And so we wanted to explore what are the enforceable policy actions that might allow you to be more efficient with that cost of land. And we wanted to talk about whether New Shoreham would be open to exploring, a range of moderately more dense housing types in the use table with performance standards to, help control what those look like and how they align with community character. We have seen that, across New England in other kind of seasonal economies, this is something that folks are exploring. And so I'll kind of jump forward to show you what this sort of looks like. You'll hear about missing middle housing is what this is, the large kind of topic for how folks talk about this range of housing options. And that can go from ADUs all the way up to walk-up apartments. Walk-up apartments probably aren't contextually appropriate for New Shoreham, but we think that some of these other smaller options may be. And so, we just pulled some examples to kind of illustrate some examples in New Shoreham we think sort of do align, and that you might be able to introduce this type of housing but have it look kind of familiar. That some of the bigger homes in New Shoreham, if they were multi-unit structures, they might kind of look similar to some of those bigger houses that house more households. And so that's why we're introducing this concept. Because getting back to what we're trying to get at is, we want to find ways that you can serve more households more efficiently because there is such deep need, and find ways to reduce the gap. And so if you think back to that chart that I just showed you, that sort of has cottages all the way to walk-up apartments, this is just an example of how the land costs can be spread across those units, and sort of what a difference it makes to allow to go from sort of 4 units even up to 16 or 10 units makes a difference in terms of having the cost of one lot shared across multiple units. So you can see, looking at a cottage complex, if you're putting cottages on a 2-acre lot, you can fit about 2. That's going to be about $350,000 per unit, that land cost. But if you are open to a little bit more density, so we just take the Manor House example, 24 units maybe is too large, but just for the sake of arithmetic, you can reduce the cost per unit for land if you went up to that 24 by $300,000. And so that's really using, if you're putting public dollars towards it, it's using them a lot more efficiently and allowing you to serve more households, which is why we might suggest that you explore moderately more density as is appropriate. And so I know that's kind of a lot. I can pause if anybody has any questions about that, or Ashley, if there's any other context you want to throw in.
Okay, Chris? I think the microphone needs to be turned on.
Hi, Chris Warfel. Was wondering if you came up with a number of units desired for Blog Island, or what would be an appropriate target? I don't know if that's in your presentation, so asking that question now. Thank you.
I have a question back to that question. I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding. When you say the number of units desired, do you mean as part of one development? I'm not. Can you give a little bit more specificity about what you mean for that?
Sure. I meant in total, what would be an appropriate island target for us to develop affordable housing units, affordable dwelling units, or ADUs? let's say, assume 2 people per dwelling? Like, have you come up with a number of people that actually need rental units?
So we haven't done anything specific to that other than what you've already done in surveying, the community and asking about the challenges they're having and the need. And so that's the data that we currently have,
Okay.
along with, HUD data that does attempt to identify need. And there's a couple different ways to look at that when you talk about what's the appropriate number of units. It really depends on kind of where you're coming from in terms of asking that question. If you're looking at it from purely a development perspective in terms of like carrying capacity of the land, that might be a very different number than, say, if you were looking at that from the context of like how many people do we currently have that we need to house, that are not properly housed, or that are so cost burdened that they need assistance in order to reduce that cost burden. Those are 2 different things. And so we haven't really gotten into that conversation at this point. We've looked at this in terms of what data is available, and then pulled together what we think are some potentially viable options to kind of go down that road and explore those further. And as part of that, we will continue to work with the town to look at the need. But this project in particular does not contain like an in-depth analysis of the need and where where it could be built and how it could be built. Our job with this project is to give initial recommendations and identify, a handful of strategies that the town can work on. But it might be, you raise a good point, and it might be something that the town does want to kind of dig in deeper in the future if you're going to start to implement some of these strategies, to make sure that the strategies that you are implementing are aligning with your need.
Okay, I should have identified myself. I'm on the housing board, and I'll say there are at least 2 different entities that are approaching affordable housing in different ways. And so, your strategies hopefully will, dovetail into those 2 different methods that I currently am aware of. And the question has always been, well, how many units should we build, and what are we planning for? And so we have a number, but it's not, I would call it not a very scientific number. And that's why I asked the question, if perhaps you had a better method of coming up with what the total need was on Block Island. Not talking about density per
Yeah.
area or anything like that, just what is our actual need for rentals?
And we would be happy to work with the committee or take a look at that, information that you have, and try to help you refine it further as part of this project.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And so this is just kind of,
Sorry,
oh, sorry.
one more question.
Yeah.
Mark McGuire, also on the housing board. So I just wanted to point out that the numbers you had in your presentation for Ball O'Brien, the dollar figures,
Yeah,
those do not include the land.
okay,
So the land is already acquired. Those were bids to actually do the buildings.
yes.
So it might be even worse, is what I'm saying, I guess. But thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Elizabeth, now you can go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And so this is kind of a smaller example of where we might suggest that you look into a bit more flexibility in your enforceable policy. So, as we mentioned, development costs are really high, as well as the cost of land. So the regulations in the around planned development districts include kind of a little bit of rigidity that is going to make it hard to make a project work, because there are limits that say you can only have 1 or 2 bedroom units, and that you have to include elderly units. And so that can be something that can be quite hard to make a project work if you're kind of need to go to the state to access funds for age-restricted housing, which are even more competitive than sort of the broad pool of funds for like family housing or unrestricted housing. That is just another sort of stricture on a potential project that is going to make it harder to pull off. So that's just kind of a small example where we think that a little bit more flexibility might make that more effective. And then we also think that ADUs specifically are an area that we could dig into more. One idea that we wanted to put before you is exploring allowing smaller subdivision of existing lots where there was an affordability restriction recorded. And part of the reason behind that is also looking at costs, which are significant for ADUs as well. This is a really long math slide about what we think it might cost in New Shoreham to produce an ADU. We took costs that the Housing Resource Center over in P-Town on the edge of the Cape had published in January 2023. They were estimating it costs about $360,000 to build an 800 square foot ADU. And so adjusting that for construction cost inflation, as well as New Shoreham's unique location being on an island, we think that it might cost closer to $435,000, $440,000 to build an ADU in New Shoreham. That's something we'd also be happy to dig in further if that's important to dig into that detail. But if you're looking at a homeowner who wants to put an ADU, on their property, if they wanted to do that project of adding an ADU to their property, if they needed to finance that and needed to take out a home equity loan of credit or do a cash out refinance, if they did that at 7% over 20 years, they'd need to pay about $41,000 a month, which is about $34,000 or $3,400 a month.
Yeah.
And what we showed you earlier was that, with that median household income of about $67,000, that median household can only afford about $1,700. So there's a real gap. It wouldn't be, someone can't break even and produce an affordable ADU. And so, if you were gonna just account for the income you would make from an affordable rent, you'd only be able to support a loan of about $215,000 when we think the cost of construction is closer to $440,000. So there is a big gap there too, which is why we would explore whether you could recoup some of those costs through allowing for smaller lots that can spread the cost of land further. And in addition, there's been some innovation on allowing ADUs to be owned, and so separating title to the primary residence in the ADU. San Jose, California is kind of the sole example nationally right now to do this, but recognizing there's that need and desire for affordable homeownership. In New Shoreham, we think that exploring how and whether you might be able to condoize ADUs might be a way to break the cost of land from the cost of housing and use ADUs for more affordable homeownership opportunities. And so those are kind of the enforceable policy menu options we wanted to put before you. We think that those would make a lot of sense to tailor with programmatic actions. So we have some sort of programmatic actions that you might consider. And so this sort of speaks to the question from the folks who got up. But one thing that New Shoreham might consider is developing a housing production plan that might evaluate housing needs in a little bit more detail, and might investigate some of the tipping points around, like, what would it take for an owner to build an ADU? What type of grant support or technical assistance might make a difference for more households to make the decision to add an ADU to their property? Could also gather information from folks within the employment community, social service providers about sort of what the dynamics are that we can't get into, at the level that we're digging into things, and talk to folks from the housing board or other folks kind of who have similar knowledge but work regionally to understand what would the most high impact changes be. And as also part of that analysis, you could look at your existing low and moderate income housing stock to understand sort of who's served, are there any properties at risk? How does that affect kind of what kind of our next phase of affordable housing production looks like? You could focus more on increasing the capacity of your housing organizations and the housing organizations that are active in New Shoreham. This could involve kind of community-based building in order to increase the donor base for these organizations and their capacity to kind of move things forward on a regular basis and continue to advocate for these needs in the community. We have a slide later on that you potentially could create a community land trust that might pursue alternative tenure structures. It's possible that you could create an ADU support program at this type of higher capacity nonprofit. And a higher capacity nonprofit might be able to collaborate with existing conservation organizations on a bit more regular basis. And so one suggestion is that you could create a community land trust, which could mean incorporating a new nonprofit or attaching this to existing actors. Community land trusts typically offer affordable homeownership options and use a ground lease, and then they work with homeowners on an ongoing basis to make units that are affordable over the long term, and they're typically community controlled. And so there are some precedents on similar seasonal island communities where community land trusts have been a really great fit. So Church Community Housing, which is local, but also on Martha's Vineyard and on the San Juan Islands off of Washington, community land trusts are pretty active organizations working on their affordable housing strategies. And Cape Cod is also looking at exploring a regional community land trust. The town could also could explore creating an ADU support program. I kind of touched on this in a few other slides, but this could kind of range from coaching or technical assistance to having pre-approved designs or providing loans or grants. There are some good examples on Cape Cod of different communities and nonprofits working in this space. And so these are specific examples that are mostly from Cape Cod. And so you can see that folks are doing a range of different things to support the creation of ADUs. In some of these kind of similar island communities dealing with affordability and conservation challenges, there's been a good alignment between conservation nonprofits and affordable housing nonprofits. Some things that have been successful in those places, sometimes those organizations have come together to adopt policies of geographic non-competition or doing cooperative acquisitions and aligned public education to show that their interests are similar and that they do have the ability to work together. Kind of the best example of this is on Martha's Vineyard. And then something else that kind of sort of in a different direction, sort of more broadly to support existing homeowners, the town may want to explore tax exemptions for rentals that are offered year round. This is something that Massachusetts is doing they have a new designation for seasonal communities, and this is part of the program that those towns can provide tax incentives if owners are offering year-round rentals. And then there are also, a bunch of other actions we want to acknowledge that are coming out of the town's comprehensive plan, and so those are listed here, just so that we make sure those are in front of you as well. And so I think that's kind of the full menu that we wanted to talk about. Ashley, was there anything you wanted to add or add any context to what we just talked about?
No, I think you did a great job going over everything. I don't know if that was a lot of information, so we'd be happy to answer specific questions about any of those ideas, and we can go back to slides if you have specific questions or wanted to go over anything in a little more detail.
Okay. Let me start with the board first, and then I'll go to the audience. So first of all, is there anybody on the board who has questions or comments? Okay. No. All right, so questions from the audience. Chris, I saw your hand first.
Thanks again for doing this, Chris Warfel, Housing Board. You've touched on a lot of things that in various ways people in this community have too as ideas of how to create affordable housing. I'm a little familiar with Church and Community Housing, if it's the same one. Is that the one in Newport? Can you explain to us why they are so successful, what their model is? Because I'm not really understanding it, but we have had conversations with them, and they do amazing things in my estimation. Thank you.
So I mean, I have worked with Church Community from the municipal side as the planner, but have not worked with them on the development side. So I don't know that I have enough of an in-depth understanding of their success. I think, I don't know, Elizabeth, if you have any. I know you've looked into other models that do it similarly, if you wanted to add anything, but I don't have any specific knowledge of Church Community that would give me the ability to tell you, why they're doing a great job.
Other questions? Keith?
I think Peter has his hand raised. He may have some insights for us.
Well, let me have Keith ask his questions, and then I'll come back to Peter.
Oh, okay, got
Sorry,
it.
I did not see his hand up.
And I would just add to what Ashley said. I think that Church Community Housing works across a number of different communities. Something that you'll often hear about Community Land Trust is it's always an effort to get to scale. Every unit that you add makes it more possible to fund your executive director. So Church, I think, works across different communities. I think they have a few different lines of business. They may do housing counseling. I'm not sure. They also do stewardship for inclusionary zoning units that different municipalities produce. So they sort of have several different areas that I just know of off the top of my head are ways that they're kind of staying afloat as a nonprofit, and I might even be missing some. But it's something definitely to talk to them about, as they are kind of the regional powerhouse in that space.
Keith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Elizabeth. My name's Keith Stover. I live on Beacon Hill Road. Just a few things. For Weston and Sampson, is your relationship with the state sort of a two-way relationship? In other words, are you providing the state with feedback on this as well? Always looking for an advocacy opportunity. But your discussion of Newport that Chris just asked the question about really sort of solidified one of the comments I wanted to make, which is scale is an issue here. And there's a feeling, at least from me, that it's complicated enough and expensive enough here that it's shocking to people who are making state policy and state financial allocations, so that we don't really even, I'm not even sure we get to the table, notwithstanding the number of meetings that I've had, that Cindy's had. It's really challenging. And I think the frustration for us is relatively small things move our needle. In other words, we're not talking about needing 1,000 new affordable housing units in the next 2 years, but that requires the state, who just got approval for a significant bond, has some money available, to be allocating this for communities like ours, which are clearly square pegs. And there may be others, but my bet is there's no other that are like us. So to the extent that you're contract with them as a two-way street. We would really appreciate, when you're providing them with feedback, to say, look, you have an anomalous community that's very welcoming of affordable housing, but need to get through on a project-by-project basis some of these things. So I'll stop the lecture there. But the other thing is I am, and have been for a long time, I am very intrigued by this notion of a capital subsidy for the creation of accessory dwelling units. When you look at even sort of the admittedly top-level data that you're reporting in this document, arguably one of the cheapest things we can do is to provide capital subsidies for the development of affordable year-round accessory dwelling units. And I wonder whether you sense that there are other communities who have actually done that. I'm not, you've probably looked at our ADU ordinance, but we already have a provision for pre-designs, et cetera. I think we're doing a lot of the things we need to do there to make it easier, the work that Jen's doing and others are doing. But that missing couple $100,000, or it might be on a sliding scale, even if it's $50,000 or $100,000, if we get 10 units of year-round housing for $1 million, that's the cheapest housing that we'll get, where we work in conjunction with landowners. So to the extent that you're doing more research, it would be really helpful to get a feel for that and whether any other communities, not just in Rhode Island, but region-wide, have tried that approach. Thank you.
All right. Peter, yes, you have your hand up.
Can everyone hear me? You can hear me? I was just.
Can you turn your volume up? We can't hear you.
How about now?
Aha, good.
All right, good. Hello. I was hoping to be there in person, but found it prudent not to go with the ferry not running. I look forward to working with you. I just wanted to mention about Church Community Housing that I'm the former city planner of Newport and worked with Church Community Housing in that capacity. They ran the community development block grant program for Newport and several other communities, and have very dynamic leadership. Christian Belden, the current executive director, worked there for a long time, and Steve Ostagai, the director emeritus, really built that organization into what it is today. If you folks haven't been working with them, haven't met with them, I encourage you to do that. Maybe you can get them to come out to the island or go in a Newport on a field trip. It's a pretty excellent operation, and I think a lot of best practices to share and potentially apply to Block Island.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? Wait, Chris, very quick.
Chris again. We have recent discussions with them, with Church, because of their success, and we are hoping that we can develop, a closer relationship, because they seem to be a really, high standard for what we're trying to achieve. So I just wanted to let you know that we are doing that. We're starting that.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I guess my question for you guys is, what's the next step? What do we need to do?
So from our perspective, we would want to, hear from the board, also, hear from the Affordable Housing Board as well. In terms of what we've put in front of you, what components of this are most intriguing or exciting for you that you'd like us to look into further? We want to refine, the menu of options that we've given you and focus on, the couple that you think would make the most impact, or that you need the most assistance with, so that we can focus our efforts towards those, and we can help with regulatory updates or even sets of, recommendations for next steps in terms of how to put programs together, to give you the information that you would need to take those, to the next level. So we're really just looking for your general feedback in terms of which of these options do you feel, are the best fit for New Shoreham and are worth, further investigation and investment as part of this project.
Okay.
Talk about it next month too. I mean, to kind of.
Okay. I was going to say, I think I'd like to do two things. Next month, after we've had a chance to think about it, make a list of things, but I also would like from the housing board, what would your first three priorities be for exploring for more in-depth information? I don't know when your next meeting is. Do you have one between now and when the time we meet in January? So could you just put this on the agenda and talk about your three options and give us maybe just a quick 1 or 2 sentence why you pick those three, so we would have that to guide us. Since I think you guys have more experience working with affordable housing than we do, although we have spent an awful lot of time the last year and a half working with some of the new regulations. And
Could I just jump in?
yeah,
mention
just on and
that,
then Gail wants has some
just
comment.
Separating out the affordable units and the attainable units when you have that discussion, because I'm not sure some of the regulatory changes would possibly affect like the affordable and the attainable, especially the ADUs. Those are more attainable units. So just think about that as you like during your discussions.
I think the city has a placeholder for this discussion already on the agenda for our next meeting.
Excellent. As I said, I really would like some guidance from you all since you work on this on a weekly, monthly basis. And I think that we can put our heads together and come up with some areas that we really want them to explore and give us some more information. Gail?
I was just wondering, I would love to attend that affordable housing meeting, and I'm wondering, I guess I should attend that first and see how your meetings are run, because I haven't attended one before, but does it make sense for us to have a committee like we did for the 513 committee that has council, planning board, affordable housing board members, sitting around and discussing all these in a more, I don't know, I found it to be a very efficient process to be sitting in a room at a table and throwing ideas around and actually making determinations more readily than we can at meetings like this. That's not meant to be derogatory, but it just more discussion oriented work sessions, right?
That could be one of your recommendations from the housing board to us also. Okay.
When is the next meeting? Does anyone?
Yes. 17th, Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you make that, Gail? Good. If there's anybody else from the board who could make it, I'm sure they would be happy to have you.
What time was it again?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Tuesday, 17th.
Yes, it will. Anyway, all right, so we will look forward to hearing your report next month. And I thank you all very much for coming today. It was a lousy day and we certainly appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedules and coming. So thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you very much for the very nice presentation. Okay, thank you again, guys. It was great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Elizabeth, that was a nice presentation. And Ashley, thank you for the introduction. Okay. Number 4, Capital Improvement Program, 2026 to 2031. On the consistency of the proposed capital budget improvement program with the New Shoreham Comprehensive Plan. Amy?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
How are you all? We can do this a couple different ways. I think I'll defer to the board. I can go through line by line, or I can hear questions that you might have. What's your preference?
If it were me, I'd go through line by line because that's just the way I like to do things.
Okay.
But I'm open to suggestions.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. Although you will find on the page, there are even line items that don't necessarily have content.
You can skip those.
Well, they're on there for a reason, which is they may be things that don't specifically have an action item now, but
they-
we don't want to forget that they exist in the bigger context.
Okay.
So we'll talk about those as well. So starting with first, the layout of the page, we have the 24 and 25 budgets. The year that we're in currently is obviously 25. We have a new column this year, which is the 26 requested. Over the years, we've had comments or questions about what was asked for that wasn't granted, what kind of changes did you make when you presented this to the planning board. So we've added that requested column. And so in all cases, you can see what was presented by the departments, except for those items that we determined to be operating. We said, hold on to those. We'll talk about them in the operating budget. And we're still getting a lot of those smaller operating requests, and we're just holding them and moving them over to the regular budget. And then the main column for discussion today is the fourth set of numbers, the 2026 proposed, and then the out years, of course. So top to bottom, emergency generator replacement at health services. That was $150,000 of federal COVID money that the town allocated to that project. Installation is expected in January, so that's underway and sort of comes off of our to-do list, which is great. The next group of line items is the Coast Guard station. And I will say that for anyone who listened to the town council's discussion last week, that came up as an area of discussion. And the numbers you see here and the funding and the plan that will likely solidify really doesn't talk about different uses. It says we have needs that are being met by that facility: housing, storage for vessels, storage for equipment, seasonal housing. Can we expand that a little bit? Maybe, but it's really about what can we do to secure the property and the buildings to be sustainable in those current uses over a longer term. So that's really the focus right now, but we'll continue to have those conversations at the council level as well. And so for the years 25 and 26 and the station house, this includes stabilizing the south station wall with shingling, siding, painting, some window attention, motor pool and apartment mechanical improvements, including boilers, some plumbing, septic repairs. So those kinds of things that need to be done. And then one of the topics we're considering right now is whether or not we need a engineering look at the station before we start talking about what the next steps may be over there. So all those things are in the mix for the current plan.
At one point, I know we have a long history discussing this, but at one point, I think I heard you mention that it costs the town $80,000 a year to maintain the property. Is that still true?
I would say that is the bare minimum. Like that's the keeping the lights on minimum number.
Really?
It's really not taking the extra steps that we need to make sure that we're maintaining the buildings in a way like you would maintain your home in theory, you know, where we're not doing then major south wall repairs every 10 years because we actually did that in recent history, but we didn't keep it up in between. So things like that. I would say that number's probably higher. And so when you start to look at 25 budget is 150, we're looking at about 300,000 for 2026. That's probably closer in addition to the 80 of what you might need on an annual basis to do the regular work.
I'm just curious, roughly percentage-wise, how much of that whole property, the whole complex, is used for storage? Because to me, real estate is of prime value and storage seems like such a waste of
You know,
money.
I will actually get back to you with that number because I think it's misleading.
Oh,
Because I use the term storage, but when you think of the harbor's operations, that's really what they're doing there. They're operating a department out of the boathouse. And that's a material use. And if they didn't have that space, we would have to replicate it somewhere else. Even in the lower part of the motor pool, that's probably something you would consider storage, but up above you have the apartments. The station house is all habitation.
right.
The chief's house is all habitation.
Mhm.
Again, there is a garage there's been talk about whether that can be used more
Mhm.
effectively or not, but I shouldn't use the word storage. It's operations and housing.
Okay.
So. One of the things, the next line item down is, this is a little bit of a placeholder, is $30,000 for generator removal. And that's because one of those bays at the motor pool is actually occupied by 3 no longer functioning generators. We're going to try to surplus those. If we can't surplus them, we need to pay for the disposal so that we can use that real estate more effectively. So again, hopefully by the time the final capital budget comes out, we've actually been able to surplus those in a different way at no cost. But either way, we're going to get them out of there. The library is next if we want to move ahead.
Yes.
And so the big topic at the library is the elevator, that for 15 years, we always said it may go, it has gone. And so they are on a path to replacement, which is pending for fall of 2025. There's a long lead time, as you can imagine, and there was trouble finding a vendor who could facilitate the installation of their unique space. But the library trustees have found that. The estimate for the project is $165,000. The trustees have committed $30,000, and they do have a grant that they are submitting to the Champlin Foundation. So again, currently the placeholder there is $135,000, and we're committed with the vendor. We're moving ahead, but there's a hope that that number may also come down if the Champlin Foundation comes through. So. The other topic at the library that they're spending a lot of time on, and this is under general interior work, is really HVAC, mechanical improvements, and mold remediation. And again, it's been an ongoing process. You sort of cycle through the different floors and then come back to a room then that needs attention again. Yep.
Why is that always a problem?
It's a mechanical system for a building that is very sensitive to climate. And so it's almost a primary function of that space. So, and as I said, we tend to do it in phases. We never tackle the whole thing at once. And so if you're working through a 3 to 5 year schedule of phased work, by the time you get to the end, you are back to the beginning. So right now they're focused on the basement areas and the computer areas. And that's sort of the next stage of it. I wouldn't say it's going to be done after that because we know something else will.
Again.
Yeah.
Is that building more sensitive to an HVAC system that isn't very efficient or successful, however you want to?
No, I think they just have a lower tolerance because of the nature of the work that they do. We might accommodate a little more humidity in this building than they would tolerate at the library. So they have
Because of the need.
because they need to protect their assets. Yep, and their equipment.
Thank you.
Yep. The next item down is the police station, and our line item there is on a current year project with the dispatch center renovations. Again, this was funded with the COVID money, $80,000. This is being done over the winter with the work expected to be done by spring. This includes ballistic glass, some safety and security relative to the front window, bollards, entrance and egress, things like that. So sort of important, but not grand scale renovations. Town beach facilities, again, it's that ongoing maintenance of the buildings that crosses the capital threshold. And so at the beach, what we're talking about is similar to the library, sort of staggering a rotating schedule of capital replacement work. For 2026, we're looking at decking. For 2027, we start to talk about plumbing. That building will then be about 6 years old and time to start proactively replacing the plumbing in that building, which is, again, sort of the material function of what it does: bathrooms, showers, decking. It's plumbing and wood. So trying to get ahead of that before it actually fully deteriorates. So we have a 2 years, 26 and 27, and then an alternating schedule there of the $30,000 contributions. Moving on to North Light. I apologize, the notes are cut off on this. So the 26 request was for solar generation and storage. Their solar system is not functioning at the moment. And also for architectural investments for second floor development. That second floor isn't used. And the thought, both from staff and from the Northlight Fund, is that it may be time to consider redevelopment of that second floor, either for a keeper, for a rental, sort of Airbnb, whatever uses can be aligned with the use of that property. And that more habitation will increase the attention to the ongoing maintenance, meaning somebody is then more committed to ensuring that we're staying on top of the work that needs to be done there. The other part of that in the outer years is the deployment of a maintenance program that we figure is about $125,000 every 3 years. In reality, we have Abcor who does most of the work out there. They're not coming every year, but every 3 years, we have amassed a significant amount of work that makes it viable for them to mobilize, come out, give us a season of attention, and then catch up on the things that need to be done. So we're starting to plug that in, $125,000 every 3 years to be on top of that plan. Yep. The other part of the Northlight funding element is whether or not we are able to secure remediation dollars from the wind farm projects in order to fund that. And so I do expect that by the time we complete the capital budget process, we'll have more information on that funding schedule.
And just a quick question, are they also considering its vulnerability to sea level rise in the decision-making in terms of how much money they're putting towards this site, which is considered risky in that regard?
I don't know if that's a factor in how much they will commit, but it is likely going to be part of the program for planning and ongoing maintenance. So,
thanks.
Yep.
Amy, is the parking lot at the Northlight included in those numbers?
It's not. That's a great question. I can't say that I know anyone's paying attention to that.
Due to your, it erodes, it gets covered in debris in most storms.
Yeah, off the
they're thinking about that.
top of my head, I'm going to say that is a DOT responsibility, but I need to look exactly where the line is. It is something we can follow up on, definitely. I think that was last attended to after Sandy. Other questions on the Northlight? Thomas is on there just again, so that people remember that it's happening. Occupancy is expected in spring of 2025. So it'll be exciting to have that completed and people in the buildings, and it comes off of our list, and then we can talk about maintaining it.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, it'd be very nice to talk about maintenance with the project. That'll be fun.
I'm going to remind you of that then.
I'm safe in saying that for the first 5 years. After that, you're right.
I have a placeholder in here for funding for the comp plan. For 2026, by the end of fiscal year 2026, we'll need to be working on that project. $60,000 is what we have been carrying for years. I do expect that that's probably light, but we need to go back out and understand what those costs might be. But that is coming up, and we do need to have a funding program in fiscal year 26. On page 2, we start to move into fire equipment. I will say the fire department does an excellent job of identifying their needs. So they certainly have the most robust funding plan because they ask for it, which is great. There are a series of first vehicle, tank, and engine replacements in 2026. We are looking at engine 4. If that is funded, they have already got a spot in the production queue. So that one, again, if it has the financial support, will actually take delivery of fairly quickly. In fiscal year 27, we're looking at tanker 1, and then fiscal year 31, they are looking at replacement of engine 2. So again, they have their mapped out schedule based on the life of those assets. For rescue, they're looking at Rescue 3 by the end of 2029. And so right now we've broken that across 2 years of funding with the idea that we may be able to fund that out of pocket if we plan ahead. So that's there. Under equipment for 2025, that number is the $1 million authorized in the November referendum for the pump. We're about to place the order for that. We're just working out some final details. And in the out years, you've got replacement of the bottle compressors and 3 Power Life stretchers. So, and again, fire and rescue do try to secure grant funding for a lot of these equipment replacements along the way, but they've identified the need. Hopefully they can come off the list, but if they don't, we need to meet those commitments. The building, the public safety complex, is a big number and still has a fair amount of uncertainty as we work through what that plan looks like. I expect that the building committee will start meeting in January. So if you're interested, definitely participate in those meetings. And I expect we'll have a funding discussion over the next 6 months about what that final number is going to be and how we're going to pay for it. We do have the $3.5 million federal appropriation, and we're waiting on a $1 million state of Rhode Island grant as well. Questions on fire rescue? Okay. No. For highways equipment, really the big item there is the sweeper replacement. And we're looking at 2027 for that. Most of the other equipment needs are related to our DOT agreement. And so in theory, again, we're having some trouble coordinating with the state on their execution, but the state should be stepping in to meet those needs. So again, we're only responsible for the town's capital investments on those kinds of things. In harbors, and this is where I've left a couple extra lines. Not that these things don't need attention, but we may want to continue to talk about them as we go forward. Expansion of the West Dock. The second line there is Old Harbor Utilities. We've started a program of replacing a few pedestals every year. And as we do that, upgrading the service from 30 amp to 50 amp. That wasn't an option when we rebuilt the dock, but it is now. And so they're doing a few every year. The second part of the 2026 proposal is for some state mandated fire suppression updates for the West Dock specifically. And so the state fire marshal has said, we have to do these. It doesn't matter what they cost. And so we've left room in the budget. For the Old Harbor bulkhead, the town did allocate $40,000 of ARPA funding in the current year to start the engineering for Old Harbor bulkhead. My hope is that we will be able to refine the $200,000 number that's a placeholder now for 2027 before the end of the budget process. So we have a better sense of what that final project would cost. Again, this allows the town to take barges directly into Old Harbor without having to span over the dock itself in order to facilitate the offloading of materials. So right now it happens, but it's not the most effective process. Renovations to the visitor center. The number in here for 2025 was just for outfitting that we may need to do. Obviously, renovations have not started. They are still underway in terms of planning. So Mike Shea, who's the lead on this, has been having conversations with the Ranowskis, and they're working through their process, and we will continue to update both the planning board and the town council as we have more information. But that's not something we can drive from our end. We are letting them take the lead on their building. In New Harbor, I think the big or most interesting ones here are the last item, and that's the New Harbor inner dredging, specifically related to the channel. So this is from the hog pen to Paynes, essentially. And that hasn't been done in quite some time, and therefore it requires a pretty material amount of planning, permitting, and regulatory coordination. So this is a 2-year project, $50,000 each year in order to get through that initial hurdle. The thought is that we may be able to maintain it at a lower cost once we've gotten those regulatory elements in place. A little bit more like Old Harbor, where yes, every 5 to 10 years, we have to do some major permitting work, but you can work under an annual permit in between. So planning for that investment. Questions?
Just in general, if you anticipate a project to cost, let's say, $600,000 10 years from now, are you able to put monies aside every year towards that goal? Because doesn't the state require that you spend what you bring in?
We are able, I would say 10 years is a pretty long horizon. But we are able to hold projects over, I'd say 2 to 3 years, and we do that with an action of the council. We do this already. So in June, when there are capital funds that have not been expended, and a lot of times there are because it takes that long to get projects done, the council can hold those funds for another year and then renew them as needed. We don't like to hold them too long. People start to forget what they're for, forget what the goals of the project are. 10 years is a long time, but you can plan appropriately over a short window. So I don't want to say it's not possible, but you only want to do it when you're ready to execute.
You see, the reason I find it so interesting is that, for example, if you deal with climate change and coastal resilience, you need to have a 30-year plan in place, ideally.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice if you could budget for that as you go along?
I think they have seen that it doesn't work as well in theory with municipal governments as you might want it to, because you don't necessarily have that continuity over such a long amount of time, which is why they've gotten away from it. I'm not saying it's not the right idea. And, we've been building up reserve funds like that for something like the West Beach revetment. When we have some, I won't say extra funds, but funds that aren't used for that project in any given year, we do hold them because we know that the work, when we do it, will be material. Also, we tend to be in a funding crunch so that the luxury of holding money aside for things that aren't on a short horizon for execution can be challenging when there are immediate needs that aren't being addressed.
So I remember that Corneck Road was placed, I think it was last time we went over the budget, that was like a 10-year goal, and it was something around 600 grand. And I asked, where is that money going to come from?
Yep.
So where does Corneck Road still have?
We'll get there. It's on the next page. I think the number might even be the same. And we'll talk about why.
Okay.
Just a couple other things to get us through. And this dovetails to your question, Sosha. When you look at Marine Patrol vessel and pump out replacement, we have a couple placeholders there. And a lot of that timing is grant driven. We know that when the time comes, we can secure CVA and EMA funds for those replacements. We hope to never do them early because we want to maximize the life of the vessel, and we want to coordinate with the timing of somebody else contributing 75% of the program. So we keep them in there and just kind of roll them forward as an identified need that someday we'll have to step up and meet. Let's see what else. One of the other things that came up at the council meeting, did it come up at the council meeting? The transfer station. It certainly will next week again, because we do have planning funding as a placeholder for 2026 with an idea that we have been saying over the last few years, there is a need and something needs to be done there. we haven't been able to define exactly what that need is. So that's still on the plan for 2026 with a much larger number in 2027 of $2 million in terms of reconfiguring facility use, whether we can expand composting, whether we can use sort of the gasification process, other alternative programs. But we don't have an executable plan for those. We just keep talking about the ideas, and so we're holding it as concepts that haven't taken priority. If that makes sense. So that's what we're showing again for transfer station, is that planning money and sort of immediate needs, while the conversation evolves around what, if anything, actually needs to happen down there. So if we go to page 4, a little aside for the school.
Sorry, Amy,
Yep.
just before you go on to page 4, I just have a question about the public safety complex. Is that
Oh, sure.
in addition to the 15?
Yeah, and this is a placeholder that I don't know how thoroughly Marianne articulated this last year when she was here. We've obviously been talking about the fire barn and the needs there as the first step. And then whether or not a second step is needed, meaning once you get through that, which we anticipate will be a long process, will it be time then, almost by definition, and because then you've got new versus old right next to each other, do you need to turn attention to the police station, which includes the dispatch, and be ready to talk about that as a next project, as a phase 2? So that's not a commitment yet. It's okay, once we've done this, is that the natural next step? So that's why it's over in that last year as things we need to continue to keep in our brain that are likely to accelerate as we move through this project that we're paying most of our attention to. And I would say that particularly a need if the fire project is not a brand new building and turns into a smaller scale on the same site, because again, that dispatch center gets caught in between. And so does that one meet all our needs, or do we need to address some additional needs that weren't captured? So, yep. The school did put in 2 capital requests there totaling $53,000 around bathroom upgrades and tiling. This is obviously in addition to the $4 million project that's currently underway for HVAC and exterior improvements at the gym. They are also in the process right now of their new stage 1 application. So that'll go to RIDE probably in February, and that'll start to map out what the needs, including the funding needs, would be for the next round of school improvements. So again, if people want to pay attention to that, it's happening now and over the next few months. And then we get to talk about Corneck Road, which is that first line there. So it looks like I did actually take it off in terms of an out year. Because as you pointed out last year, Sosha, that 465 is a number that we've had since post Sandy, when that initial report was done. It wasn't relevant in terms of a real funding number, but again, as a concept, we want to keep that open, particularly as we're waiting for information to come back from the grant that we're currently in with the Infrastructure Bank and Fish and Wildlife. And GZA is now under contract to do that work. And so we do expect more information and more data to come out of that and a more robust plan, but it's not something we can put on a page at this point.
Will there be a public hearing of sorts once the plans are approved?
Yes, I do believe throughout the process and as a final presentation, there is public engagement.
Good.
Yep. There are some other items on here that are, again, I would say, concept placeholders. Chapel Street sidewalks and Corn Neck Road sidewalks.
Been talking about that
I
for a
know.
number of years. Yes.
And Mike Shea saw these and he said, I'm not sure I even want these anymore. But they are part of the TIPS program. And because we are struggling with DOT at the moment, that reminder to them that they've made these obligations on the part of the town is really important. We may say, if they showed up tomorrow to do Corn Neck Road sidewalks, you know what, your design doesn't meet our needs, but at least then they're showing up with some of their commitments and we can redirect. But if we don't have these written down anywhere, they just get to not do them and think that everything's fine, and it's not. They have these obligations. They have the $15 million that they committed to last year, the 5 for the building. You know, those are all really important, and we're trying to keep them front of mind so that we can remind DOT that they've made these commitments to us. So that's why they're there.
Good.
Speaking of DOT, how do we, and is it part of a plan to get the other roads maintained, improved, overhauled? What's the status of that, or is this completely separate from this conversation?
It's not completely separate, but I don't have a status update. We are out of agreement with our state road agreement with DOT, and they have not pushed forward in this budget year that we can find any of those commitments that they had talked about 18 months ago. It's been really hard to get information out of DOT at this point on how they're going to meet their commitments to Block Island.
Okay, because they, as you all know, everyone knows, they're in a pretty serious state of disrepair in particular areas anyway.
Yeah.
And don't forget about Ocean Avenue North. Supposedly the solution there is inexpensive and simple. They are to raise the catch basins and to control the backflow that will help mitigate the flooding in that area. It's not even sea level rise related. And I'm told that Mike Shea has been going there every year, talking to them about it, and it's getting nowhere. It's ridiculous.
It
as
is.
My mother-in-law used to say.
So we are working with our lobbyists and with our representatives to
Good.
try
Glad to
to
hear
be
that.
as persuasive as possible with DOT. But I don't have any updates right now. So,
It's just something to keep in mind for down the road.
absolutely.
Okay, thank
Not
you.
even right now.
Yeah,
Right now.
yeah.
Not
I was thinking down the road between now and March. That's why down the road I could define that.
Yeah. I will say the last line there, the townwide road improvement program, that we have control over and that we're actually doing. And so this is something where the state has funded 2/3 of what a community might need for particular projects. So we've combined 2 local $1 million commitments. So we've put in a total of $2 million to do things like aprons at Snake Hole, Pilot Hill, attention to Beacon Hill, a couple other sections around town where we've put in 2/3. We've put in 1/3 and the state's put in 2/3. So we'll do a lot of that work in the fall and then the subsequent fall. And I expect that the state, Jim, Jeremiah, and Mike Shea will hold some public forums in June, July to let the public know what's happening, what the timeline is, what closures and impacts might look like. So that is underway.
Okay.
Oh.
I know. It's hard for both of us to see it. I'm at least facing him. Peter, go ahead.
So I just wanted to make sure that folks have the state transportation improvement program on their radar. If you're not already aware, I think the solicitation is coming up in the next couple of months. So that's the DOT's 4-year transportation plan, and it goes through the state planning council. And I'll check in with Allison, but you'll want to make sure that you're submitting projects to that and working with the state planning council to have those projects included in the state transportation improvement plan.
That's great, Peter. And maybe we can connect offline. I realize you can't see me. I'm here, it's Amy, because I don't believe that we have been in touch with the state on that.
Good comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Amy?
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank
That's
you.
a very heartfelt thank you also from me. Since finance is not one of my strong points, I'm always in awe.
Thank
Okay,
you.
would you want me to make a motion that we believe this is in the reflective of the comprehensive plan? Thank you.
Yeah, I would leave it to you whether you're ready to do that today. In terms of timeline, you have through your January meeting. If you want to think about it, you're welcome to. If you want it off your plate, I'll take your motion anytime.
I'm very comfortable with it, so I'm happy to make the motion. Let me see if I have a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? It's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Amy, very much. Appreciate it. A lot of work's gone into that.
Yeah.
And frankly, I like this process much better than what we were doing 10 years ago. Okay. Number 5, Ballards Inn Realty LLC, Plat 7, Lot 23. Request for a Mylar to be signed off as subdivision is not required. Would you all just take a quick look at the map, make sure that you don't have any questions or comments, and that you're happy with either me or Jen signing off on this? Okay, Gail, we'll start with you.
I just want to be sure if we're to approve this.
Let me start. We don't approve it. It's just that you're comfortable with me signing it. We don't make a motion or anything.
Okay, so if we're comfortable with you signing it, I just want to be sure we're not attesting to its accuracy or anything along that line, that it's.
Yeah, I hear you.
Karen, I don't know, if you want to speak to that. Sorry.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think if the goal, and I'm not honestly familiar, Jen, just for the record, the goal here is just to assist Ballards with their request to record this survey on title. Is that it?
Yes, they would like to just record the survey in the land evidence records. So I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, we started a process where we review any maps before they get recorded in the land evidence records. So, and it's just stamped as planning board approval, not required. It does say something about accuracy. I can go get it.
I think so long as the process is simply to allow them to record, and it is clear that there is no sign off by the planning board as to accuracy, nor is there any sign off by the AO or zoning official or anyone else in the town that it is accurate. I think that just has to be clear. And I don't know if maybe that's just a matter of simply not providing a signature, but it sounds like, Jen, you might have a stamp that will accomplish that. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what
Yes.
I would prefer to
Me
see,
too.
verbiage adding that we are not attesting to its accuracy.
Well, the law is clear that anybody can record anything on title, but if there's an internal policy with the town that the clerk would request that these types of maps at least get passed through planning to make sure that nothing else is required by way of approvals or permits, I get that. So maybe it's just a matter of the planning board saying they agree. There is no additional subdivision or approval required tonight, and then that's it. Then that can get conveyed to the clerk. And Jen, do you think that would be enough? I haven't spoken to the clerk about this.
Sorry, yeah, that's been the process. So we would just stamp the Mylar and sign it with that language on it. And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, so long as it's clear that you're not acquiescing or consenting or agreeing that that's an accurate plan.
No, we're not. Okay.
Can someone just walk me through what are we doing? I don't really understand this one as much. Like, what could you just? So why did this?
About 15 years ago, we had a survey come in. It was a subdivision and it was recorded, and some time went by and then it was flagged, and we went through records to see if there was any approval process, and there wasn't. So so this process is a result of the subdivision, the illegal subdivision getting recorded. So that we're looking at any kind of survey or map that comes in, just to verify that they don't need a subdivision or any additional, planning board approval.
So by example, if we had seen a line drawn and 2 lots listed on this, that's something that would have caught our eye and we would have brought it to our attention. Well, this does require subdivision. So we would
Correct.
halt it at that point. Possibly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So seeing nothing that is out of, out of order or.
I could just, sorry,
I-
Margie, just say that it's not verifying the accuracy
No.
of the
Yeah.
plan. And I mean, I'm not a land surveyor and I don't know
Right.
anyone here is a land surveyor, so we're not attesting to anything on the plan. Like, it's just, if that's the surveyor's plan, it's his stamp or her stamp and, not,
Is there another map recorded? Is this different from any other?
I don't have the answer to that.
So if hearing no objections, I will go ahead and sign it at a later date. Okay? We don't need a motion or anything on this?
No.
Okay. All right.
And Claire, just, there could be multiple surveys recorded,
Mhm.
um, for any property, and then, you know, you could record one every week if you had one generated every week. It's just,
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Just wasn't sure.
All right. Anybody else have a question before I go on? All right. Okay, number 6, tents and storage containers. Discuss and act on a request from the town council to consider an ordinance regulating tents and storage containers and other auxiliary uses in all zones on the island. Okay. We've been through this several months now, and I think the article here pretty much reflects what we've been discussing. I'll turn it over to Karen to walk us through it and see if we have any other questions.
Yeah, so the comments that were received at the last meeting have been incorporated. It's pretty much, I think it's ready to go with one question, unless anybody has a change. And that question is, you do have the question is, right now, all of the changes have been made under your general prohibition section, which is section 111. The reason being is that you did have an exception, you did have a prohibition, excuse me, for certain things, excluding certain trailers. And at the time we started the process, it just made sense to start adding language in that section because you didn't have a tent ordinance per se. It's my opinion at this point that legally what has been drafted under section 111 general prohibition will work to serve the needs that we have discussed through a couple of meetings now. The option that you do have, which would take a little bit more time, and really I think would depend on tonight's meeting, if there are substantial additional changes that you want, at some point where the better format for this is to put it under its own section, similar to section 515 trades trailers, which is included at the end of your 2-page draft. So that's the only thing I would point out is that we are kind of working under the general prohibition section right now to make this change, to allow tents and kind of regulate them. But we're kind of like toes on the line in terms of this, whether this should need its own section. And I think if there are substantial changes tonight, you want to consider putting this in a section of its own, similar to 515.
Okay, I'm willing to do that. Anybody else have a problem with that? Okay. Nope, I don't think anybody has a problem with that. That's a good idea. I just have one comment. I brought up at the last meeting, changing the number of days when they could put the tent up from 7 to 8, so that people with various stores wanted to put up a tent for each weekend, they could do so. It still seats 7, but I thought we agreed that 8 would be appropriate. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I have
That's a-
8 there. I have 7 as stricken. That's how you wanted it? 8 is the new number?
And the 8 is the number. Mine reads 7. Now, did I pick up the wrong one? I think did yours read 7? I think all of ours read 7.
Okay, that's interesting. Mine reads 8, with 7 crossed out.
Okay.
Apparently I have the secret version.
Yes, you do.
But
So we
but
will
I
change
can-
ours to 8 to agree with you. How's that?
I can assure you that change has been made, and I see Peter's hand is up.
Updated.
Okay.
No, that's okay.
So I just wanted to go off of what Karen was saying in the work of the board. Yeah, you folks are the experts in the issues in New Shoreham, and we really see our role as, you know, looking at the state requirements and best practices. And so, you know, to the extent that you're making tweaks to the ordinance tonight and the adjusting the codification of it, I think that's all fine. We did prepare a report analyzing the document in accordance with the state law requirements, primarily that being consistency with the comprehensive plan. So we spent some time over the last week reading the comprehensive plan in quite a bit of detail. And if you've seen the report, that information is reflected there. Our conclusion was that this type of regulation is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so as you are finalizing your review, I'll let Karen chime in about the motion to make, but we're providing you the background information that would allow your work to withstand scrutiny by any reviewing body.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. We all read this and appreciate your pointing out the things for us, particularly those recommended that are with the in concurrence with the comprehensive plan. So thank you for that. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any changes? Okay, then I will make a motion that we that recommend forwarding this to the town council under a separate section, and the recommendations for approval, and that we would include that this is in accordance with the New Shoreham's comprehensive plan, and excuse me, further regulation tests will preserve New Shoreham's historic and environmental assets that drive its tourist-driven economy. And then we can also pick from down bottom of the page here, I'm on reading page 11. The amendment aligns with the town of New Shoreham's economic goals as defined in 7 to 12. Goals ED2 encourages substantial tourism and tourism activities that complement the island's unique natural environment and cultural resources. 3, makes investments in management resources for a high-quality tourist experience and protect cultural, historic, and scenic resources that are vital to the island's economy through further classification and regulation of movable structures. And 4, the tourism industry remains strong and has the potential to increase with the addition of amenities and activity offerings. Is there anything else anybody wants to add as far as with the comprehensive plan? Nope. Okay, then do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Karen. This was a good thing to get done.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm always pleased when we get something underway and then done.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 7, discussion regarding the outdoor lighting ordinance, section 512 of the zoning ordinance. And again, I'll turn it over to Karen to walk us through this.
Yeah, so this one is a little bit just a hair right behind the tent ordinance in terms of you know, how long we've been working on it. This is, as you know, is an entirely new ordinance. You know, that's why all the language is underlined. The goal here is to provide some regulation as to outdoor lighting. I know we have met on this before, and there have been some changes. I know there were also some changes sent over that I believe may still need to be pulled in. I think you'll see that at D, section D, there's a note there that we still got to pull in some of the things that were sent over to us. But my thinking on this one in particular, because we do now have a new planner, is it probably makes sense to discuss this tonight, see if there's any additional changes that you want, and then have that that process of kind of redlining picked up by Libra. And then certainly if there's any legal issue for me, I can chime in. But with your new planner on board, I think it does make sense to start involving them in this particular process, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does make sense to me, very much so. So let's go through real quickly the changes that we've added in, see if anybody has questions. We will not spend a lot of time on it since Peter's going to look at this again and we'll take it next month. Any questions on the purpose? Be my first one.
No?
Okay. Down under 3 under exemptions. I know we talk about docks later, but I think we might want to include the public docks as an exception because that does need all night lighting. It would then be, I see no problem with it not being stated in 2 places. But Peter, if you don't like that idea, I'm willing to listen.
I'll take a look and I'll let you know.
Okay, that's fine. I don't need it tonight. Monday, next month is just fine. Page 2. We've added in a couple of things, particularly under prohibitions. So if there's anything there that you are questioned about or want to discuss or add to.
I had only one question about the whole document. I couldn't find a standard on a limit on how bright a given light can be in different districts. Just because it's at the right angle doesn't mean that it controls how bright it is or how soft it is.
How much ambient light?
Okay, going back to that one from Connecticut that we were talking about and using as a guide, which I did send to everybody. I think that has some examples in there that could easily be used.
Okay.
And Jen, will you send a copy of that to Peter because I did not include that on my my email list last time.
Yes.
That was my only comment.
Okay, nothing on page 2 then?
Nope.
Okay,
I
page,
just want to mention that if you do recommend this language, you also have to recommend striking all of the other language that's in the zoning ordinance right now for lighting. Right, this is going to replace it.
yes,
So we just need to make sure that we do that.
okay. Okay, any on page 3? Okay, one question Karen asked is, should a piece be added about interior mounted lighting, which creates exterior glare? That's something I think we should let Peter guide us on for next month. My feeling is yes, but I'm open to suggestions. When we finish, I always go to the public, and you'll have a crack at it this month and next month. Okay, no questions on 3? Okay, page 4 on the commercial lighting standards has been added. Okay, and on page 5, the only thing we have to discuss here is the ordinance should be enforced by who? And I guess that question goes to Jen.
Enforcement.
Who would do enforcement of lighting? We don't have to decide today. Okay,
I mean, it's in the zoning ordinance.
okay.
I
All right,
think
so
that-
anyway, we need to fill it in next month. I don't, whatever the proper answer is. Okay. All right, okay. Gail, you have a question? Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm not sure I missed this or if it's in there, but I'm wondering about, and I'm not sure how this could be done, but houses that are unoccupied or seasonally occupied houses that are left vacant in indeterminable months, in the shoulder season where lighting is on all the time.
Mhm.
And I understand there's safety precautions that some people are using their lighting for, theft, break-ins and what have you, but there should be some, we're in a neighborhood that there are quite a few summer residents, and then the houses are unoccupied in the winter, and one in particular has a cupola with a very bright light, and it throws off a lot of ambient light, and it's on every day until 11 o'clock. And I noticed we have 11 o'clock curfew, but that's too late for those of us sitting around a backyard stargazing with all that ambient light being thrown into the neighborhood. I'm wondering how could we possibly
Is it,
put this into the ordinance?
is it like outdoor lighting or?
It's outdoor, yeah.
inside?
Every
Like-
square inch of the deck is lit up. There's a cupola, there is indoor lighting too, but that doesn't seem to throw off as much ambient light
Is
as
it
the outdoor.
Directed
I don't-
out, like spotlight or down?
That I
we
don't
do
know.
have-
And
we
I
do
read,
have a
when I was
lighting
reading the
ordinance right now,
ordinance
so-
about the down, lighting down.
Supposed to be directed.
Even if
down.
it is, it's throwing enough of an ambient light out that it interrupts the neighborhood.
Doesn't this document recommend that the lighting turn off automatically after a certain period of time?
I did see a note about having it either sensor or.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Sensor or on a timer.
But the
Exactly.
timer has 11, it says 11 PM.
Yeah.
So 11 PM is still too late, I find. Although you want to have your outdoor lighting on till 11. I'm
Right,
just
and-
thinking about the unoccupied homes. How can we control some of that?
Well, that's something for
lighting
Peter.
interruption?
Peter, you could work on that this coming month.
Right,
We'll
and
do
that's,
that.
that's also like, I mean, back to the enforcement, like I'm.
Yeah,
and
again-
you're going
again,
out doing
exactly.
Enforcement at 11 o'clock at night, so that you want to think about that when you're.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least we
Right.
could call in, we could
could
call the
put it on the
neighbor and
bulletin
say,
board, we
here's
could,
your,
yes.
here's the ordinance. Could you please accommodate us?
Yes.
Per the ordinance.
Right.
And most people will, I think, if they don't even,
Sure.
I'm sure people don't even recognize that they're
Yeah.
contributing to.
Some
an
people
issue
are
like
just
this.
worried about the health and safety and the house not being broken into and so forth. So,
Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, it's really,
Yeah.
really excessive.
yeah,
I mean,
it
you
is,
see
but
it,
that's
even
it.
if it's
That's the whole answer,
inside,
excessive. I can see
so
having some light on, but not as
Nice.
much as a lot of these people. So maybe we could figure out some percentage of lighting or,
It's a good point, though.
but it's a good point. And we've all seen this in various places around the island.
Do you feel that under F3 and 4? Do you think that, is there something you would change about those?
I don't have the printout in front of me. I read through it.
It says that the light has to be, like you were saying, after between 11 PM and 6 AM, but then lights have to turn off after 15 minutes of no activity. And then down below, for security purposes or off-hour access, which to me would maybe include seasonal,
Mhm.
maybe I don't totally understand off-hour, but to me that reads as when it's not being occupied or not being used.
Yeah, no, I'm glad
Um,
you caught that. I didn't
Shall
catch
be
that.
activated by motion sensor devices.
I didn't catch
Um,
the after no activity.
Yeah, I feel like, because I agree. and
But that-
actually, I agree.
But we must, I feel that we must allow some lighting for safety reasons, if they don't want their house broken into and so forth. But we certainly
Maybe like
can,
a certain amount
Well,
of
also-
time and hours to be on, because I do understand people wanting to have their light on for security when they're not there.
yeah.
But it's
maybe
more when you're
only have
even
it on for
home.
15 minutes,
Right.
an hour or something.
Well, like
that.
I'll leave just the light over the front door on until all of the kids are home. And like, I
Yeah.
don't leave it, and turn it off.
Yeah.
when It's pitch black outside,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to leave it.
Okay.
on.
That
and
hasn't been my concern. It's more the unoccupied houses.
I think we're talking about occupied houses with
Definitely.
people going in and out during the evening, various people. I can see having lighting. That makes perfectly good sense to me.
But I think that's the important part of like the enforcement. It's also the education.
Yeah.
and letting the public know and all the property owners and renters and
So
such.
anyway, Peter can work on that over the next couple of weeks. Okay, anybody else on the board?
No.
Anybody from the audience? Good. Now is your time.
Mark McGuire again. So that section F3 that talks about interior lights is terrifically vague. I mean, it could lead to a lot of issues, including with the title of the ordinance. It's an outdoor lighting ordinance, and it's talking about interior lights. So, and in the comments, I saw that there was some discussion of TVs. So the way it's read now, somebody could read it as to say, you know, everyone goes to bed at 11 o'clock, turn the lights off, turn your TV off. So,
I think if I recall correctly, this was for stores in the downtown area,
no,
not private homes.
that's the private residence part. That's not the commercial lighting part.
Okay.
So maybe that's an issue as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would just, Peter,
Okay, we need to look at that a little more carefully.
I think
As
so.
We've had a problem in the past with commercial
Sure.
indoor lighting being a problem.
Yeah.
Which is downtown, but.
Yeah, I think that one
don't know
applied
if
to
we should be
residential. so,
Regulating
Yeah.
indoor lighting for, however, if everybody has, huge sliding glass doors and huge windows and so forth,
Sure.
you do have ambient lighting, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's all.
Okay, that's good. Peter can keep that in mind too. Thank you. Anything else? All right, then we will roll this over until next month. And. All right. Number 8, discuss and act on the recommendations to add properties to the historic district. You have basically, I want to roll this over until next month. We need more plat maps.
Distribute some maps probably yesterday.
Yeah.
They're in your box, but I'm going to send them to Allison to work on.
Yeah, they're too small.
Yeah,
for
put them all
us.
together because they're kind of, we just piece them together. So, yes.
Yes.
So plat 4 is
Yeah.
a
This is-
recommendation,
We're just not ready to,
but you do have the list that,
yeah. And if there's
the
anything
recommended
else,
list from HDC, so maybe do a drive-by, not go on the property, but just do a drive-by, see if you think it's. Right, we do have, no, I'll
This
give
is-
you what I do have, but
Yeah,
I think it's important.
most of these are,
that list. You'll
most of
know.
these are on a major road, so
You'll
it's
know
easy
right
to
away.
drive by and look at them and not.
What kind of notification goes to homeowners who might be
Yeah, you
added?
would,
Yes,
Yes,
that's
we would
another
have
thing,
that
another
whole
reason why we're not
process.
doing it.
Got it.
We're gonna
Um,
do notification to people who we're talking about here. We need bigger maps to read. I'd like you to look at the car, drive by the car, and we will definitely notify the homeowners. So, and we definitely need better plat maps for Allison. So,
What are you looking for exactly? So the one large map with the entire district on it, like a poster size formatted?
yeah,
No, I
PDF?
want to, I'll send you what I have, because this is, I have it all like, we just highlighted it basically, but then you want.
It gotta be big
PDF,
enough
and
to
we can-
read.
But we can print it on the large format or 11 by 17.
yeah. Because
And email.
right now we've got one and it's so crowded, you even with the magnifying glass, I could not read it.
So that leads me to a question, Jen. You've been warning us that pretty soon you will not be printing out stuff for us anymore. Can I at least put in a request that does not include maps?
You can always email me and say,
Oh.
I do need something printed.
Oh,
We're just
okay.
trying to eliminate
I
so much
understand.
paper, and also if an applicant doesn't, provide the information or something comes in last minute, it's almost impossible for us to just
Okay, but
And
try
for
to
the-
keep track of
yeah.
who wants paper, who doesn't,
Yeah.
and just,
Yeah.
because
but
for me,
but
it's,
email
it's-
me.
for me, it's a quarter a page.
I don't want you to spend.
Do you know what I
money
mean?
Printing anything.
Yeah.
No, just
Yeah.
anything that you'll still get the required, like if an application comes in.
Yeah, because not all of us want to use a computer. There's some of us who are still old fashioned
Sure, I do.
and enjoy, and I like to write margins and
And
do different
colorful,
colors and so forth.
I just found that I was recycling a ton of paper
Okay.
from members.
I don't disagree with
offices.
that either, so
So
we'll try to work with it.
I mean, stacks. of
Okay.
paper.
One last thing on the list, just to have it on the record here. Several members from the Historic District Committee asked that the Indian Cemetery be added to the list.
I don't know if that,
But I asked Jen to check with the people and make sure of whether that should be on the list. But I did have requests, but it was unofficial. So just for the record.
I think it's Indian Neck Road.
Okay, is that what I'm
not
trying?
Indian
Well, they
Cemetery.
said Indian Cemetery.
I know.
That's probably what
that
they
was
meant.
the,
That's why I'm asking you.
I just.
That's why I'm saying, please check. Because I'm quite sure that what I was given wasn't quite what it was. Okay, last thing on the agenda is improvement of 2 sets of minutes. The first one is for October 9th, and the second one is for November 13th. I do have one correction for the 13th. On the back page down at the bottom, and I got a chuckle out of this one. The motion is seconded by Ms. and nobody's name was put in and carried unanimously. I believe Claire was the one that seconded the motion to adjourn, but we need to get somebody's name in there. Other than that, I don't have anything. Does anybody else have any questions? Then I'm officially make a motion that the minutes for October 9th and November 13th be approved.
Second.
Do I have any further questions or comments?
Nope.
All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you very much. I got out of here in 2 hours, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.